Welcome back to another episode on Journey to Authenticity, a podcast helping you to become fully authentic on your journey to success. I'm your host, Braiden Belknap, and I'm a human just like you, striving to build a dream life, all while I stay true to myself. But what if you're in a position of struggling operating your business? You don't know what the next step is, you don't know how to move forward, or with yourself, you're just not sure how to move forward. It's exactly why we have Taylor Proctor coming and joining us today. Simply because she's able to speak to you guys about the I Move method, where she helps you to truly listen to yourself and move forward in your business and getting the most optimal results, which can truly be related to life as a whole.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. When I first started my coaching journey, I started following you, and that was almost 3 years ago, and now we're here.
Yeah, and this is our first time actually meeting in person. We've talked online several times, so I'm super excited to be here, and thank you for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. So to jump right in, what inspired coaching for you?
So coaching for me started out as a very personal journey, and I'm a business coach now, but back when I started coaching, I was a transformational happiness mentor. And what that meant was that I had my own journey where I was if you can imagine, the angriest person you've probably ever met. My husband had a phrase, hell hath no fury, like Taylor, mildly inconvenienced. And it was true. I had a temper that would just, at the drop of a hat, right? And I realized that that's not who I wanted to be. I didn't know who I was. I just was known to be angry and frustrated all the time. And so I started on my own happiness journey, and I had some beliefs that like happiness was inherent. And so because I wasn't happy, then I must be something wrong with me.
Sure.
And so I worked through those beliefs and realized that happiness is actually a learned skill. And so then I started bringing in, okay, what are the skills to help me be happier? How do I make those into habits? And so after several years of working on my own happiness journey, I kind of looked back and I went from being angry all the time to now I'm angry rarely. And obviously I'm a human, so we have emotions, right? It's going to happen. But instead of living on the, I'm going to say negative end of the spectrum with an occasional positive, I had taken my life to on the positive side of the spectrum with an occasional negative and using the tools to be able to come back. And so I looked back at that and went, I'm sure I can't be the only one. And so I started coaching and getting my certification in coaching to help other people be happier because I had that journey myself. And a lot of that was that I had the thought that happiness was inherent. And I also had the thought and the belief that there was that societal checklist, right? Go to school, get the job, get married, have the nice house, have the toys, have the kids, have like all of these things. And I looked around and I hadn't followed that path and that checklist specifically, but I still looked around and went, I've done several things right, air quotes around right, and I'm still not happy. And that made me mad. And so I was mad all the time. So when I started doing transformational happiness mentoring, I started working with other individuals who had met the societal checklist and looked around and were like, I'm still not happy. And it's because they didn't have the happiness habits in place. So we would work together to help them develop those habits. And in that specific audience that I worked with those incredible clients, what ended up happening is that they would say, after our time working together, which was a 10-week period, they would say, oh my gosh, I'm so much happier in every area of my life. My relationships are better. I rank on a scale. We had a scale. So they rank on a scale of 7, 8s, and 9s when they would come in at 2s and 3s. So big leaps and consistent. I even have a client that we worked together 6 years ago, and he still will message me every once in a while and be like, I'm a 9 today, right? So like
That's amazing.
Continuous, because it's habits. We built it in instead of hoping and just praying that it was an 8. Anyways, so they would come to me and say, everything is great. Like I couldn't be happier. If only I could get my business. If only I could get good at business now, because they were all entrepreneurs. And while I was coaching and happiness mentoring, I also had a full-time corporate job. And in that corporate job, I was what you would call an intrapreneur, which is pretty much I would come and work for a place and they would throw me the keys to an idea and say, make it happen. So one of my roles, actually, I was there for 3 years. And in that time frame, we went from 0 team members to 30, from 1 service to 5, from 1 language to 5, to millions of dollars in revenue. And I even spent 6 weeks living in Edinburgh, Scotland, setting up our European team. So like massive amounts of growth. And for 1.5 years of those 3 years, I didn't have a boss. I would go around to the C-suite executives and the teams and say, can I just have a half hour of your time once a month so someone in the company knows what our department is doing? And they would be like, yeah, sure. Like, that's weird. And I'm like, you all don't understand. Like, I don't have a boss. I'm literally running this on my own. And to the point where I was doing onboarding and hiring processes without HR because we didn't have that support, to setting up our finances and doing our analytics and our reporting. I mean, all of it, I was treating it like it was my own business. So I'm running that in tandem with my coaching business, and my clients that want to be happier are getting happier and then saying, I just want to get good at business now. Like, that'd be the final piece. And I'm like, that's a whole secret life that I'm running on this other side corporate wise, and treating them like it's my own business in these departments and things like that. And so that really created the marriage that is now my coaching business, which is get good at business. And so I often say I'm a coach here to help entrepreneurs get good at business so they can get back into the heart of why they got into business in the first place. But my coaching journey runs the gamut from my own unhappiness and anger all the way to utilizing my experience and helping create good habits for entrepreneurs to be happy in their lives, and blending that with all of my entrepreneurial experience as well.
I love that. That's powerful. And I want to highlight something, and then I have another follow-up question. A lot of people let their past go to move forward with what they want.
Mm-hmm.
You took your past and brought it forward. The skills that you learn in your jobs, corporate world, whatever the case is, they're all learning experiences.
100%. Well, it's interesting too, because pre my corporate life, so when I was in college, I was a GM for my college radio station and one of the hosts of one of our top hit shows. And from that, I got a job working in radio in California, in LA. From there, I was able to start working from home. So I actually moved down to St. George, Utah, and I had a split shift. So it was like morning show and afternoon shows, right? So drive times. So I had 6 hours in between and was like, I got to do something with my life. So I took a wedding planning course and became a wedding planner while still having my job. Then we moved back up to Salt Lake City, and which is where we're here now, right?
Yeah.
But moved back up to Salt Lake City and went, what did I like most about running my own wedding planning business? And it was the marketing side. So then I got a job in corporate as a copywriter, and then everything grew from there to finally, when I left corporate, I was in a C-suite position. So all of that to say, even in the things that I did pre-corporate, what was crazy is part of my corporate experience was I would run events on behalf of the companies I was working for. And so I was managing $500,000 budgets, building custom. We once did a 400-pound, 10-foot rocket in a booth for a Las Vegas convention. And I didn't trust anybody to bring it down. So we put it in a U-Haul and I drove it down to Vegas, right? But we did all these things. And it's so crazy because looking back at my business now, it's not just the experience and the like things that I actually coach on, but for my coaching business, I host events. And it's like, I know how to do that because not only did I have a wedding planning business and knowing how to work with all these people and their different expertise, much like you would with speakers, right? If you're hosting summits, you have a series of speakers. How do you help them be happy? Well, I learned that clear back when I was doing wedding planning. And then managing huge audiences and multiple pieces and all of that from an event perspective, I also learned that from wedding planning, but also from the event planning side of my corporate experience. I learned how to manage teams and pull that over. And being on podcasts, speaking, having my own podcast, that's easy because I was in radio. So it's so crazy because I actually see a lot of people do what I call the eat, pray, love model, which is burn it to the ground, right? Burn it to the ground. This isn't what I want. I'm going to go travel the world in these 3 places and eat, pray, and love, right? That's the model of that book. And I think that especially with Americans, we have come to believe that to start over, to follow our passion or do these things, we have to burn it all to the ground. We have to leave it behind for the next thing to be successful. And my experience is I get to take all of that good experience, all of that learning with me, whether it helps my business side or it helps my clients, no matter what, like that's a part of me and who I am. And so why not integrate it into what you're doing day in and day out?
Absolutely. Life's a journey. Let's bring all the good and the bad and forward and turn it into good, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's crucial about that is I think that a lot of individuals believe that they have to burn it all down or do a hard stop and then start over because we're not taught how to let go of those bad experiences or how to turn them into good. And so it's like, I find so many people that will say, oh my gosh, I hated corporate. I just had to get out of there. So I started my own business. And I'm the opposite. I actually loved corporate. Like it was my bread and butter. I loved everything about it. And I loved setting the culture and setting the tone and being in those positions where I could do that. Granted, anytime somebody tried to come in over the top or control me, that's when I hated it. But most cases it was, I was lucky enough, they threw me the keys to the idea and said, make it happen. And I get to make it happen, right? And so I really loved my corporate life, but it hit a point where I was like, I can make more of an impact in coaching and entrepreneurship than I can in the corporate space. Because in the corporate space, I was working with clients like Google, Stanford University, Johnson & Johnson, and a lot of these bigger companies, but I didn't feel like I was making the ripple effect impact. It really was like, how can I create the best experience and the best culture possible for my team? And that had a ripple effect, right? You'd see team members grow professionally. I had one that we didn't have a team lead and I was running that. And as we were ready to scale, I needed to have a team lead. And so we brought him as an original employee and put him in the team leadership position and we worked together. And he eventually ended up going, there was an application spot, an opening for Google, which was our client. And he was like, do you think I should go for that? I said, absolutely. So we worked together on him to applied, and now he became my boss, our client. Right? And so It's wins like that you love seeing in the corporate space and watching them grow personally and professionally and creating an environment that they love to come to and jobs that they loved. But the ripple effect when you work with a entrepreneur is so much bigger because it's not just, oh, hey, how can I help you be better at your job and where do you want to go professionally? Instead, it's, let's break those beliefs and clear this mindset piece. And now you can take forward action here. And this has a ripple effect that's not only for the entrepreneur, their family, their community, but then whoever they're serving, whoever they're offering that product, that service, the solutions, that transformation for. That has a ripple effect for their family, their community, their larger circle. And if you're helping one entrepreneur who's helping 100 other people, and they're helping other people, like the ripple effect goes across the world. Where in corporate, I felt like it goes across my team, which got to a 30-person team, which is great, but it just didn't have the heart and the impact behind it that I love. And so it was like, it's time. I love it. Let's take all this experience and how can we apply it, what we've learned with massive clients and small clients, and apply to helping entrepreneurs get good at business.
I love that. So I want to bring it back to your beginning of your journey. Mm-hmm. So you talked about anger. And when we're born, we come with a blank slate. So my question too is, where did you learn to be angry?
Oh, my father. So growing up, anger was the only really acceptable emotion, right? I remember that I would even cry. And it got to a point where, like around age 4, you can kind of control if you cry or not kind of deal. And some of my earliest memories are being like, don't cry, stop crying, right? And so for a very long time, and until I actually started on my own happiness journey, instead of getting teary-eyed and crying, I would get angry. And if I did start crying and someone said stop, I could stop on a dime, like done. Because it was an unacceptable emotion. And so when I really uncovered and discovered my own happiness journey, that is when I started to allow myself to cry and realize that there is a plethora of other emotions, not just the main five. Like we say, anger, sadness, happiness, and a couple others there. But ultimately it's like, well, no, there's sadness, and there's a difference between sadness and grief. And there's a difference between anger and irate and irritated, right? There's so many other words and emotions that are connected to those words that when you start to expand beyond I'm angry and you start to see, oh, actually, that is a blanket emotion. If I can take the blanket of anger off that I'm using as armor, but if I can take that anger off of the table for a minute, I see underneath it are all these other emotions that I've been too afraid to feel, right? I'm feeling like I'm weak. I'm feeling the shame. I'm feeling the distress, the depression, all of these things that I was like, I can't feel this because they're unacceptable. I have to be angry instead. And so it's no wonder that at the drop of a hat, something mildly inconveniencing, I would lose my mind. And I really had to make that change. And my husband would say that phrase as a joke, right? But it was so true. And he even said, because we knew each other when we were younger, and he would say, where did you go? You used to be so happy. And it took him saying something along those lines several times, because at first I was in victim mode and angry. And so I was like, I didn't do anything. It's you. You're the problem, right?
Sure.
But it took him a couple of times of saying that before I realized, if I don't change, first off, I don't want to be this way. I don't even know who I am. But also, if I don't change, I'm not going to have a marriage. I wasn't getting the good projects at work. I wasn't getting the promotions and those things either. Like, nobody wanted to work with me because I had a temper. What husband wants to be walking on eggshells with their wife all the time? And so I really had to make those changes and take my steps on the happiness journey to be able to be who I am today. And I'm so glad that I did. And my dad is still around. He is still in my life. This is not like a blaming thing by any means. I think also for a lot of men, when they grow up, they've been told that anger is the only acceptable emotion. And so I just inherited that, and it's been my job to uninherit it.
Absolutely. So was it the worry of losing your marriage that helped transform that, or what was the moment that you said, no more?
Yes and yes. So I think that we often like to say there was a lightning bolt moment. And for me, it was over time. Like I said, my husband had said something to me around like, hey, where'd you go? Multiple times before it finally clicked in my brain like, maybe, maybe I should change this behavior. But even then, I had several instances of like road rage where it was scary. One of them, I was like, the whole thing happened, and then I went into a store and everything just started swimming because I was shaking. I was so angry. And then like once the anger passed, I was like, oh my gosh, I could have died. That person could have ran me over with their car. But in the moment, I was just so angry and full of like the road rage that I didn't even comprehend. And so there's moments like that I was like, I don't want to be in this. I don't want to be this person. I don't want to feel so out of control. And then there's also just looking at my life going, is this really what I want? And when I ask, what do I want? The response was, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And so that is when I was like, what do I do to be happy? And I started looking at my beliefs and started doing all these things. And my brother-in-law, we were talking about this off camera, but my brother-in-law was like, hey, I have free tickets or $27 tickets or whatever to this like 3-day personal development conference. Do you want to go? And I was like, no, I don't need that, right? Angry. How dare you suggest it? And then I was like, well, $37, and it was like 6 months away. And so I was like, I'm not out anything if in 6 months I don't want to go. And 6 months came around and I was like, fine, I'll go. And that was a life-changing moment too. And that's where I actually got the tools to be like, all right, how do I move forward in this? And it was a Kirk Duncan event. And it was funny because I remember like a week later driving in the car with my husband. And I said, so you know that event that I went to? He's like, yeah. There's this thing that they suggested that I do that everybody in the crowd does. And I think I'm going to do it, but it's going to be kind of weird. And he's like, well, what is it? And I said, well, I'm going to put some things up on the wall, create a vision board. And I'm going to put some things up on the wall. And like in the morning, I'm going to read them out loud. Like I'm going to yell at the wall every morning while I'm looking at these pictures. And I think that will help me. And bless him, he goes, okay, you do you, right? And it was crazy too, because I realized, I knew that that would be one of the things that would help me. And as we talked about it more, and he was totally down for it, but I kept on being like, well, are you sure? Like, are you sure? And as I kept on speaking about it, it just came out of my mouth. And I realized it was a belief that I had was, well, I don't want to leave you behind. Like I knew it would work for me. I knew that I would grow from it. And I was afraid I would leave him behind if I started yelling at my wall in a vision board in the morning. And he was like, no, that's on me. It's on me to do my own personal development journey, and you do you. And so with that permission energy, I really stepped into my own happiness journey where my whole life is because I made those choices. And luckily my husband was like, you do you, I'm here for it. And he reaps the benefits because he's not walking on eggshells all the time anymore. And the benefits of who I've become as a leader, as a coach, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and all of those spaces.
That's amazing. And good on him. I mean, talking a little bit about marriage, it is so important to support one another.
Oh, absolutely.
In their own, because we can't be strong in a marriage if we're not strong as individuals.
Oh, 100%.
So I'm proud of you. And look at where you are now.
Thank you. Yes. And I mean, this was not a short journey by any means. Like in the happiness space, I think I was working on myself for about 5 years before I was like, maybe other people need this support and help too. And that's when I started my podcast. And then about 4 months into starting my podcast is when I had the opportunity to get my life coaching certification. So then I started doing transformational happiness mentoring and then snowballed from there.
Absolutely. So you transformed your happiness. You started working with people through their own happiness, working corporate, and you transitioned into business coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the time frame of mentoring people on happiness to transitioning into business coaching?
I want to say it was about 3 to 4 years of happiness mentoring, doing the happiness podcast, all of those pieces, and then realizing the shift point.
Sure.
So yeah, it was about 4 years of happiness mentoring, and we're on about 3 years of the business side.
That's amazing. So obviously this is the Journey to Authenticity podcast, and a big part of that is I went on a sprint of interviewing entrepreneurs from making $1 million plus a year to scraping pennies, right? We all have that entrepreneurship journey. Every single one of them struggled with happiness, authenticity. What are some tips that you would have for them to start the journey of finding themselves and finding their happiness? Yeah.
So one of the things that I do through my business mentoring is a technique, a method called I Move. It's my own method, but it stands for intuition, marketing, operations, velocity, and execution. And what I find is that a lot of entrepreneurs will have an expert, a guru, a coach, whoever, say to them, oh, do this and you'll get the success that you want. And so they're like, okay, like I'll do that. Let's go. And so then they do it step by step and it falls flat on its face. And then they're like, well, what's wrong with me? It worked for them and it worked for the other people that are in the program. I did exactly what they said. Why didn't it work? And then they start that downward spiral. And then they start to be unhappy and dissatisfied in their business. So what we do with the I Move method is we really lean in on the I first, which is intuition. And intuition is a little bit all encompassing. It's not only listening to like that gut feeling, your higher power, your higher self, universe, whatever you want to call it, right? But it's not only listening to that, it's taking a look at your mindset, your beliefs, that component of it. And then what we have found is that when you can take aligned and congruent action via your intuition, then you start to get massive momentum in your marketing, which can be supported by operational processes that allow you to scale, which then gives you space to add growth strategies that add velocity without burnout, ultimately allowing you to execute with ease. So that is the full I move method. So for entrepreneurs specifically, if they're like, look, I'm not happy, I just don't know what to do with my business, even if they like have grown a successful business, oftentimes they're like, I'm feeling really called to do this, but I just can't for whatever reason, and they're unhappy about it. And that's where the intuition, the I moment really comes into play. That said, as far as tips, I think it's important to know the full understanding first.
Absolutely. Thank you for going into that.
But as far as tips go, I think very first and foremost, one of the things that I love to recommend is doing emotional clearing. And this really helped me on my journey. It still helps me to this day. It allows for a lot more ideas and energy to execute when you can write on a piece of paper, I am feeling, insert your emotion here. Usually it's negative one, right? Insert your negative emotion here because ... It's not I am feeling blank because ... And then doing the bulleted list, answering that question, getting those stories out of you. I am feeling this way because I believe this, and I'm feeling this, and I'm seeing this, and I'm comparing to this person, and all of those things. And it allows you to get it all out and organize and on paper. And then some people call it like a write and burn, right? And so then you burn it or you rip it up and you throw it away. But it allows for that freedom of expression and identifying your emotions and then clearing that space so that you can bring in more positive, more happy emotions. And in the business space, I like to say, okay, let's clear those things out. Let's have a positive affirmation or declaration to fill the space with positivity. And then let's connect to the intuition of like, what's the action steps that you need to do today to help you get your goals in business? And what are those 3 things that we need to do today to help you move forward? And the combination of those 3 is usually way more than enough to get them where they want to go and happier with their life.
Absolutely. And I love that you specify, right, I am feeling instead of I am, because I am attaches the emotion to our identity.
Yep.
And when it's I am angry, I am sad, you're making yourself to be a sad or an angry person. But when you say feeling ... it allows you to detach yourself from that emotion.
And then couple that with a declaration that is usually an I am statement. It's that identity piece of who you want to be, the type of business owner you are, the type of business you have, the success that you're garnering, right? So it's like we cleared out the attachment to the emotions while still identifying and working through them. We've cleared out that attachment, created an affirmation declaration that is, who are you? Who are you working towards being? And then tapping into the intuition saying, hey, how do I become that person? How do I hit these goals? And using the action items from that to move forward.
Absolutely. And it's such a critical point there that you mentioned you still use it to this day.
Oh, yeah.
We are always becoming more. I always say I'm a firm believer in God. God really was very purposeful in giving us a beginning, middle, and end. Because if we had forever in this world, in this physical being, and being in this body, you're either going to have the people that have high success because they know that they can succeed in whatever they want.
Right.
It's just a matter of time. Or it's well, whatever, I'm going to be here forever, so I have time.
Well, I love that too, because we have a lot of people that think they have time when we don't.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I have time. I'll chase that dream tomorrow, or I'll do that later, or whatever it is. And it's like 3 months has gone by and you've said you wanted to do that for how long, right? It was really funny. I was working with a client on Tuesday, actually, and I do a service called Quantum Power Days. So we get together, and it's called Quantum Power Days because we tap into their innate power and quantum leap their business forward. And last year we did over 30, and without fail, every single one of the people I worked with was like, if I hadn't done this in one day, it would have taken me a minimum of 3 months to do it on my own. So we talk about it's a quantum leap, right? So I was working with someone on Tuesday, and she had some beliefs and things that we needed to clear out so we could make some movement and momentum. And afterwards she goes, I just have to tell you, the things that we built out today, like, because it's not a coaching session. It's like we build, we implement, we execute, like the momentum is there. so that you don't leave tomorrow and then be like, I don't know what to do. It's like, it's already done. Let's get your business to the next levels. Anyway, she goes, I had set on these things that I needed to do, 2 of them specifically, for 3 years. And her beliefs and her emotions had kept her keeping it in that 3-year mark of like not moving forward. And so one of the first things we did was discover that and break through them to then help her take the action and implement these things in her business. But on the whole, I've got time, she thought she had time, right? But the truth of it is if we want to get good at business, decisiveness and action, I'm sure you've seen this across people that you interview, right, is one of the number one things. Fail hard, fail fast. And so if we can implement and execute and move forward now, because we have a time constraint, put that on ourselves, now we can really truly grow as individuals and grow our businesses. So in her case, it was like, okay, well, we waited 3 years. Let's not do that anymore. Let's break through these beliefs, get you set up for success, and now implement these. And now they're a huge part and a growing part of what she's building.
Absolutely. And whether you're brand new starting the entrepreneurship journey, or if you're 50 or 60, there's no perfect time than now.
Right.
So why not, okay, maybe you wasted 3 years of not executing. That's fine. Why not now?
Yep. And we don't have to do it the eat, pray, love way.
No, we don't.
I think that's another thing that holds people back is like, oh, I have to start over. I have to burn everything to the ground. I've spent 15 years in corporate. Now I have to completely put that to the side and start over. And so it's like, well, I'll just keep on going because that feels daunting and overwhelming.
Exactly.
But it's like, you don't have to do that. You can still work your job and the things that you've worked and built and chase that passion and chase that direction and move forward in your business and just tip the scales, right? Now my business is taking off. Now I can make the decision. Do I want to leave corporate? But you didn't burn anything to the ground in the process.
Absolutely. And to that, like you mentioned a client that didn't take action for 3 years on very specific, critical pinpoints, it sounds like. Mm-hmm. That's okay. What did you learn so that in 3 years, we don't do the same pattern again?
Yep. And to be clear, she wasn't my client for those 3 years.
That's fair. Good call out.
I don't believe, one of my pet peeves, I think therapy is important, but one of my pet peeves, and I think a key difference between therapy and coaching is I feel like people are in therapy for 10 years and are still talking about their childhood problems. And coaching is like, okay, we've talked through that. We've worked through it. We're moving forward. And like, I'm actually what you would consider a short-term coach. I don't work with most people longer than 6 months because I believe in results-driven coaching and like, let's get you results. Let's get you where you want to go. And then you're on to the next thing. And I may or may not be the coach to support you on that next thing.
Exactly.
Right. I'm here to help you get good at business today. And so I want to be very clear. She was not my client for 3 years. It was, she wanted to make that progress, that momentum, that movement, and wasn't sure how, signed up with me for the Power Day, and we worked through it.
And just like that. And that's the magic of coaching is
100%.
The magic of good coaching, we'll specify there, is that when you know how to move clients forward and they're willing to lean in, they have to have the willingness, results follow quickly.
Oh, 100%.
And the beautiful thing about learning to coach too is you get to coach yourself.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, that goes back to what you were just saying. Like, I still do, I do the techniques, the habits, the things that I built years ago to get me in the space I'm in now. I still do them and I still recommend them to my clients. And I'm still saying, hey, that self-talk seems a little rough. Let's share a win a day so that we can get our confidence back up. Right. And so my clients are sending me a win every day. And what's crazy is on the back end, every day I track my financials, track my sales calls, my sales wins. I track growth in a couple of key areas, and then I write a win from the day. Right? Like, I do it myself.
Absolutely. And it's because it got you here. Mm-hmm. You don't get somewhere and then decide to eat, pray, love. Do the next thing.
And I often say what got you here won't get you there, right?
Absolutely.
But that's where it's the habits versus the strategies, right? So there are things that are habits that continue to support you in your life, then they'll get you wherever you need to go. Strategies, what got you here won't get you there. And I see that a lot in business. Well, this worked for me and now it's not anymore. Well, because what got you here won't get you there. So it's this difference between strategies and habits. But I think as a coach, you've got to have a expertise and experience in both.
Absolutely. It's the pivotal moments of life of say, okay, I went from 1,000 to 10,000 and now I need to get to 10,000 to 100,000 in a number sense, right?
Yeah.
It's also, I went from learning how to go from anger to happiness, and now I want to go from happiness to joy to grateful to this to that. It's a completely different strategy, but the habits look very identical.
Yes, exactly.
So an entrepreneur comes in, they're happy, and we master the intuition. Let's talk a bit about marketing and the move method.
Yeah.
Tell us about marketing.
So obviously marketing is pretty broad. So one of the things that I often see with my clients is, and for myself too, I had a background in marketing in the corporate space. So I often say when I was in corporate, I was running departments in operations, strategy, leadership, and marketing, right? Like that was my bread and butter for 15 years, which is beautiful because it means that I can help support in a lot of different ways across the iMove method. But I see for a lot of business owners, and I'm going to say specifically online service-based business owners, in the marketing space, they get caught up on what do I post on social and how do I create my content, right? And I always make this joke, but it's really not a joke. Everyone's like, that's really my life. Where I'm like, are you sick of feeling like you're shouting into the void and you're speaking to the same 6 people? Your mom, your sister's dog's account, and then 3 people who are already your clients, right? And so one of the things in marketing I like to look at very first is for a lot of people, they think, oh, I need help with my content marketing. But I like to discuss the pre-marketing phase, which is much more of a lead generation. If you're speaking to the same 6 people, no one, like you can create the best content in the world. No one's going to find it.
Absolutely.
Right. So you have to figure out how you can use your content to nurture and build that know, like, and trust factor, but you've got to bring people into the ecosystem first. So when we look at pre-marketing phases, that's what I like to discuss, which is, do you have a message and a first tier problem? How can you get out that message to the world and highlight that first tier problem of your ideal client? So how do you get out with that? That's podcasts, that's events, that can be ads, that can be, a whole bunch of ways, numerous ways that you can get your message out. But you have to have a clear message and that first tier problem. Then that first tier.
Can I slow you down real quick?
Yeah.
First tier problem. Can you expand on that and what that means?
Yes. So thinking about your ideal client, okay, the person you love to work with, that they sometimes call it ICA, your ideal client avatar. What is the first problem that they have, that they're aware of, right? So if I'm working with business owners and I'm specifically highlighting on the M of iMove, I could say, you're shouting in the void, talking to the same 6 people, right? And they're like, yeah, that's me. That's my first tier problem. So then second phase of this is that you offer a solution to that problem in your free resource, right? And we all hear, oh, you should have a freebie or an opt-in, but a lot of people are like, okay, I made it. Nobody's coming. It's like, because you didn't have the first part where you've got to take your message to the masses and highlight the problem and then offer how that can be a solution in the next phase, right? And so whether that's a white paper, an ebook, a PDF, a template, a quiz, a discovery call, a secret podcast, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Do it in a medium or that makes sense for your audience, but it goes message, first tier problem. That is shouted out to the world in a variety of ways. Then you solve that problem in your free resource. Now you have people coming into your ecosystem. So now you can nurture them via email. You can invite them to follow you on social, those types of places. In that free resource, you solve the first tier problem and you introduce the next problem. Okay, so let's say on the level of content, first tier problem is that you feel like you're shouting into the void with your content and you don't know how to get clients from it. Cool, let's solve that with our free resource. And in that free resource, we say, now that you know how to create the content, now the real problem is how do you create that content at scale so you don't always feel like you're a content creator instead of a business owner, right? How do we solve for that? follow us on social, join our email system, da 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 da. Now they move to the third phase where we solve that problem, we introduce any other issues and problems they may be going through, and that builds the know, like, and trust factor. And that's where your nurturing comes in. So most entrepreneurs are living in the third phase. Some might have that second phase, most are missing the first phase. So one of the things I like to look at when it comes to marketing is, do you have that pre-marketing system, or are you creating content that's just shouting into the void? Let's help solve that. Let's get your message honed in, those first tier problems, those next level problems, that resource, and that outbound marketing message.
That's powerful. And now, so you build out your marketing and now operations.
Yes.
I feel like this is where you like love to sit in.
It's so funny because I do. Like, operations is really one of my, I really love all areas of iMove. I really do. Operations, I feel like, is the underdog. Like, nobody really likes operations. They're not sexy. It's not fun. And I love them. I think it is the most fun thing ever. And I like to look at, when I'm working with entrepreneurs in their operations, do they have, first and foremost, they have SOPs, which is standard operating procedures. And for a lot of people, they'll be like, well, it's just me. I don't need an SOP. And I love to share this story. So back when I was doing happiness mentoring, personal development reading was huge, big part of that. And so I actually started a paid online book club. So every month there would be several of us get together and we would read a book, we would discuss it, we'd talk about it all throughout the month in a Facebook group, like all these things. And I did that for about 3 years. And about 1.5 years into it, I was like dropping the ball everywhere. So we would have voting. So voting would open up on the 20th. We would vote till the 25th. And then on the 5th of the next month, we'd have the book finalized. So I'd announce it at the first of the month. The book is this, based on our voting. Go get it now. We start reading on the 5th, right? Because it was just me and I didn't have operating procedures in place, I was trying to remember all the dates, all the times, all of these things. And so what would end up happening, it'd be the 23rd, and I'd be like, crap, I didn't do any voting. Hey, everybody, here's the votes. Like, all the stuff, the books that we're voting on. And it was just stuff like that starting to happen right and left. And so my client and customer experience was starting to drop because I was just trying to manage it all in my head. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to sit down and write out every single piece as though I was going to hire somebody to do it. So if I was training somebody, what is the checklist of things to do? It ended up being 30 different unique steps that I did every single month for this book club. What was beautiful is now I had a checklist. So I would just set self time. Hey, check the book club checklist. Say that 5 times fast. I would check the book club checklist, and then I would just go and be like, oh, the thing I need to do is this. The thing I need to do is this. So I suddenly had so much more mental, emotional, and time, physical space bandwidth because I had built myself an SOP. So even as a solopreneur, it was like suddenly my client experience was better. I wasn't dropping the ball because I wasn't keeping it all in my head. I built myself an SOP. So operationally, I love SOPs, not only for myself. When I was in corporate, SOPs for the win. And there's even things where back in corporate, I had asked one of my team leads, I'd said, hey, if you go out of town, which you should take your PTO, right? But I was like, if you go out of town, if you get sick, if something happens, will you create this SOP so that I can have your back? So that if something happens, I can step in and I'll have your back. And she was like, well, it's not that complicated. It's only 3 things. And I said, I know, but if you just wouldn't mind, like, I'm not going to remember it 6 months from now when you take your honeymoon. So just, if you wouldn't mind, could you create it as an SOP for me so that I can just pull it up and do the work? And she was like, yeah, okay. So she comes back a couple hours later and she goes, so it's actually 50 steps. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I knew it wouldn't be just 3 easy steps. Like, there's so many subcomponents of it. So even her doing it day in and day out, when I asked her to write an SOP, she's thinking it's 3 easy steps. And then when she writes it out to like train somebody or to hand it off so that I can have her back, she realizes it's so much more. And when we can do that as entrepreneurs, we can suddenly realize, well, no wonder I'm exhausted at the end of the day and I don't have time to focus on that thing I want to focus on because so much energy has been taken up by this thing that I could just turn into a checklist. And when you get to the point you can hire, it's so much easier to say, okay, here's the checklist, the expectations. Let me train you and walk you through on how to do this. And then you're supported by this ongoing. I don't have to micromanage. We also can look at this on a quarterly basis and see, okay, what needs to change? How do we optimize this, make this better? And it doesn't live in that person's head. They're able to grow, and scaling is so much faster. So when we look at, okay, you've taken that align and congruent action. Now you're getting massive momentum and movement in your marketing. And there's several other components of marketing, but I always like to look at the pre-marketing phase first. Then when you go to your operations, it's like, how can we scale? Let's start with SOPs, because no matter where you're at, you're gonna need them. And I love this too. I had a client, she goes, well, can you just tell me the types of SOPs that I need to build out? And I said, well, no, because every company is different. And I said, look, I can show you the SOP for our 10-person international team for one of the companies I'm an owner in. I said, I built this communication plan in SOP, and it's massive. And it's everything you would need if you're communicating across the organization in different time zones, in different languages, like all of these pieces. I'm like, you don't need that. So when you're starting with your SOPs, start with the problem areas. So if I go back to the book club example, I'm like, this is the problem area. I'm dropping the ball. Let's just create a list so that I can be organized. And that rolled into everything working out in a much better way, a better capacity. I could scale that product because suddenly I wasn't being overwhelmed by the 30 tasks I did every month. I just check the checklist and come back to it, and there we go. And so I always like to look at what makes sense for you. Where's a problem area to start your SOPs so that you can start to scale in that area, which of course will scale into all the other areas of your business.
I love that. And can I just say this? I move method is also applicable to life.
Oh, yes.
Me and my wife have SOPs for everything. Cleaning, dogs, chickens. Like, why not? I schedule it, I put it on a task list, and I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yep.
Makes room for your mind to be more creative.
Now, let's say you take a cruise. You can say, hey, so-and-so who's coming and taking care of the dogs for us for a week. Here's the SOP for the AC in the house. Thanks for house sitting. Here's the SOP for the dogs. Here's the SOP for them getting it fed in the evening versus the morning. I mean, for my dog, consistency is everything. And so I'm like, okay, he eats, and then within 45 minutes, he will have to go back outside and poop. Right? Like, it's going to be in that time frame. Like, we are dialed in that much. And so having an SOP and being like, here it is, that they can refer back to while you're out on vacation also ensures your animals get the best care and your house gets the best care. And that person's not more stressed out than they need to be when they're doing you the favor of watching your house and your animals, right? Like, SOPs for the win. And the I Move method, you're exactly right. So I use it in my business for businesses, but it also works great for leaders and leadership, right? Taking those intuitive actions, marketing your ideas of how to grow the department or how to grow the business or how to grow the team, right? Marketing those concepts, those strategies, building the SOPs to help support it and grow, giving it the velocity that it needs, and everyone gets to execute with ease.
Absolutely. So let's pivot to velocity. Talk to that for us.
Yeah. So velocity is really growth strategies. And I have it as the V, as the fourth out of the five, because for a lot of entrepreneurs specifically, I think it does relate in a personal space too, where there's so many options, right? Oh, I could do so many different things. What do I do? How do I do it? And we get shiny squirrel object syndrome. And entrepreneurs get pulled in so many different directions. This expert said this, and this expert said this, and this expert said this. Well, when we're taking that align and congruent action and moving our business forward, now there's space because operations and things are happening. You're like, wow, this is great. How do I take my business to the next level? And that's where the velocity really gets put into play. And I love to recommend, okay, what is the one strategy we could implement to add more velocity to your business without burnout? Because for so many entrepreneurs, it's, I'm doing all these things, none of them are getting me anywhere, and I'm burnt out. So we've eliminated that by listening to our intuition, using that to support our marketing and our operations, and then going, how can we grow the business in a scalable, sustainable, aka non-burnout type of way? And so that is highly customized to the individual, but it's always looking at, okay, what would make the most sense for you here and now today? I love sharing this story of a client of mine that she's roller coaster revenue, right? Just up and down, up and down, up and down. She's like, I'm so sick of always launching. She had her ups, she launched, and then she would crash because it was such an energy drain. And she wouldn't make any money for the next 3 months until she could get herself back up to a launch space, launch the thing, and it would just cycle, right?
Sure.
Over and over and over again. So when we looked at that, it was like, okay, like the action is intuitively aligned. The marketing is working. The operations when it comes to launching is working. Like everything is working. It's just not sustainable across 12 months. It's only sustainable across 4 every quarter. And so we looked at the growth strategies, the velocity space. And I said, well, how can we do this so you don't have to burn out on launching every time? How can we bring people to you at any point in time instead of a big launch and a big event or whatever it is? And so we actually worked out that she could go live and interview her ideal clients in her Facebook group. Facebook group has 1,000 people in it, and that's a very engaged, ideal clients for her space. And so when she was like, well, a lot of them want to be speakers and they want to share their message and they want to change the world. So it's giving them a platform to do so in her group. Now she's built that one-on-one connection. She can just say, hey, I'm looking for people to come speak in my group. Hands raised all over the place. Now she has a connection. She's offered them value. And afterwards she talks to them and says, hey, I think it'd be really great if you wanted to, you mentioned this, and this on the call. That's stuff that we address and focus on in my group program. We would love to have you. Because you've been a guest on the show, we'd love to do it, give you a gift and do it at this price point. And now, instead of launching for people to join her group program once a quarter, she's just talking to one person, 2 people at a time per week. But even then, if you're looking at 2 people per week across a 4-week month, right? So now, even if she has a 50% close rate, her group is growing way more than she would have if she was doing launches all the time. And the revenues like this now is starting to stabilize. And we have found a way to add velocity to her business without burning out, while just exploring what would work better for her to bring in those ideal clients, offer that value, and have that opportunity to work with them in a solution-based space. And I think for a lot of people, when we talk about velocity, they think scalability, which I agree, but there's different ways to scale. I've scaled a team from 0 to 30 team members and international and all of those pieces. I know how to scale that way. But also, as entrepreneurs, we can look at scaling in the ways of, okay, if I work with people one-on-one, I can talk to 500 people at once. Sure, that's amazing. And we hear that scale, have a group program, do all these things. But it's like some entrepreneurs, the spot they're in, you've got to talk to people one-on-one and really understand where they are at, what they are struggling with, so that you can help create solutions for that. And then take that message to the world, the mass market, right? And so in her case, it was like she was doing these big pushes, getting a few people signing up. And it's like, well, let's just get a few people signing up every month without this big push. You just get to come on and interview them, make those connections. That's great. And when she hits the goal of her group monthly, now that's sustainable reoccurring revenue. She has that foundation, and she can look at the next growth and velocity giving strategy.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And I mean, that impact alone, you talked about impacting entrepreneurs on a big level. I mean, just that one client that you worked with, really, you've been impacting hundreds of people across the world from one person.
Yes.
So that's exciting. Now, execution.
Mm-hmm.
Talk us through that.
So execution is really a look. I would say iMove is bookended. Most entrepreneurs are like, okay, help me with my marketing. Maybe they're like, help me with my operations. They're thinking, okay, what strategies do I need, right? So there's your M, O, and V. Most easily ignored are the intuition and the execution. And a lot of those both they both incorporate mindset, right? Intuition is the mindset of like, okay, I'm taking this aligned and congruent action. I'm focusing here. I'm taking this action today. And the execution is actually taking that action, because we can talk about it all day long. I could say, hey, implement SOPs. And be like, that's a great idea. You going to execute it? Maybe, maybe not. And so the execute with ease really comes back full circle and is like, okay, what can we do to make this easy on you? How do we set up your day? Is it time blocking? Is it Pomodoro method? How do we make this happen so it's easy for you? In addition to that, again, everything's full circle here. When we take aligned and congruent action, execution does become really easy, because you're not sitting there going, is this the right strategy? Is this not the right strategy? How do I move forward in this? What do I need to do? Like, you're not caught in that. You're like, this is my action. Now I do it. And you trust that it's going to work out. And so the intuition piece really aligns with the execution piece in a very full circle way, so that you continue to move through the I move method and grow your business.
That's amazing. I could talk to you forever, honestly. You have such a plethora of wisdom and knowledge, and I could keep going. So as we wrap up here, how can myself and my audience be supporting you?
So it's really interesting, because I would say I would flip that. The best way to support me is to support yourselves, meaning as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as coaches, as individuals who are taking that path, that journey to authenticity. It really is continuing to invest in yourselves and invest in what makes sense for you. And when you're able to do that, when you follow the I move method for yourself, follow your intuition and guide it through the rest of the ways, then you're able to make that impact on the world. And that is what I am all about. And if I can be a support to you guys in that process, then I would love to be able to do so. So the way to support me is to invest and support yourselves.
I love that. And a couple more quick questions. One is, what is your definition of an authentic life?
I would actually interchange authentic with aligned, because oftentimes I can be authentic when I am at a funeral, and I can be authentic when I'm at home sitting on the couch, and I can be authentic when I'm on camera for my business. And those are three very different people. Right? Like, they're all me, but how I behave and how I show up and what I talk about and all those pieces are completely different at a funeral than if I'm just sitting on the couch watching TV versus if I'm on camera talking, doing a podcast interview. And so alignment instead of authenticity is what I strive for. Because if I know who I am and what I stand for, regardless of the situation, I can show up as the true and aligned me. And I'll say it again, right? With that intuition led, that's that aligned and congruent action. And so when you're aligned, when you're congruent, you naturally show up with the real you. You naturally convey that. And I'm a big fan of looking at that too with businesses in your brand, right? How do you show up with your brand in an authentic and connective way? It's 2024. Nobody wants to buy from the big box, faceless, nameless owners anymore. They want to know who these people are, what they stand for, how they care. And so building that personal brand, creating the business brand is all about that alignment. And I think authenticity is important. Again, I'm just like replacing the word,
Sure.
But for me, the alignment piece is, how do I show up? Who am I? How do I convey who I am to the world? How do I make that impact? And when that is my guiding factor, it's easy for me to show up authentically regardless of the situation.
And I love that. Those words really are well connected, because if you're aligned, you're naturally authentic. And if you're
100%.
authentic, you're aligned. But that's powerful. That is a very unique way to put it, that across every interview, which you're number 110.
Congrats. That's awesome. 110.
I've never heard that before. So I love that perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And if there was one last piece of advice that you could leave with the audience today, what would that be?
Based off of what we've discussed today, I'm going to leave two if that's okay.
Please.
Based off of what we've discussed today, I would recommend just intuitive alignment, like follow your intuition, learn to listen to it, everyone's intuition is actually like a fingerprint. So it's completely custom to the individual. And there's actually over 60 different ways. So that's a 60 different ways that you can receive intuitive hits. And so exploring and examining your intuition and following it, getting to know what that looks like for you is huge. So if like one thing to take away, it would be that. Second thing is also based off of what we've discussed today is that there's no time better than now. And I always say that when I was doing happiness mentoring and my podcast was about happiness, I would say you can get, you are capable of happiness abound. That was the name of my business, my brand, my podcast. And now my business is Get Good at Business. And I say, just remember, you can get good at business. So the time is now. Take the action, follow your intuition, and you can accomplish anything.
I love that. One step at a time, too.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a lot today. It takes time to master the I move method.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to take forever.
Exactly.
You can master it in a matter of 3 to 6 months. And then, as we've talked, you're always becoming. So set the foundations for yourself. Set up the SOPs. Set up your operations. Start to listen to yourself. And then just keep becoming better and better.
Yes. Mic drop.
Exactly. Thanks for that. Thanks so much again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much again for listening to the Journey to Authenticity podcast. If you liked what both Taylor and myself had to say today, go ahead and subscribe and leave a review, as this helps me to ensure the most optimal success in getting the highest quality and most interesting guests to help you transform your life moving forward. Also, while I have you here, if you liked what you heard today and you resonate with my messaging and you're ready to transform your life, not just feel good once in a while and hear some motivation, but you're really ready to take your life by hand, go ahead and go to braidenbelknap.com or go to the link below so we can jump into some coaching together. Thanks so much, everybody.